The rain came down in cold, relentless sheets that Tuesday night in November, turning the empty streets of Millbrook into shallow black mirrors that reflected nothing. 11 o'clock. Ethan Carter had been on his feet since 5 that morning, and his body carried every hour of it like weight in his bones. He drove his battered pickup through the dark with both hands on the wheel and his mind already home, already standing in the doorway of the back bedroom, where his 6-year-old daughter Lily would be asleep with her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. He was not looking for anything. He was simply going home. Then his headlights swept across the bus shelter at the corner of Maple and Fifth, and something made his foot ease off the gas. A woman sat alone on the metal bench. She wore a thin white dress that the rain had turned nearly translucent. No coat, no shoes. Her bare feet rested on the wet concrete, and she held a white folding cane loosely in her right hand, the way a person holds something they've stopped expecting to use. Her eyes were open, pale, and fixed on nothing, pointed somewhere past the edge of the road and into the dark. She wasn't calling for help. She wasn't looking around. She simply sat there, utterly still, as if she had decided, finally, permanently, that no one was coming. Ethan pulled over. He rolled down his window. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She didn't respond. He climbed out into the rain, the cold soaking through his jacket in seconds. He moved slowly, the way he moved around animals that had been hurt. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just want to make sure you're okay. Can I help you get somewhere?" Her head tilted slightly toward his voice. And then she spoke quietly, clearly, with the precision of someone choosing each word before releasing it. "Don't take me anywhere they'd expect," she said. "They're already looking for me." Ethan stopped walking. She had said his name. Not sir. Not Mr. His name. Ethan. Spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had known him for years, who had no reason to explain it and wasn't offering one. He stood in the pouring rain and stared at a blind woman he had never seen in his life, and something shifted beneath him, not fear. Not quite. Something more like the sensation of stepping onto what you believed was solid ground and feeling it give, just slightly, underfoot. She said nothing more. She waited, and Ethan Carter, without being able to explain why, walked back to his truck and opened the passenger door. Ethan was 38 years old, though most days his reflection suggested something older. He had grown up in Millbrook, the kind of Midwestern city where everyone knew your truck and your father's name, and he had never particularly wanted to leave. He had started engineering school at 21 with a plan that felt solid and a future that seemed, if not guaranteed, at least reasonable. Life had other arrangements. He worked now as a maintenance contractor, construction sites, apartment complexes, commercial buildings moving between broken things and fixing them, keeping what stood from falling down. It was honest work. It left his hands rough and his lower back in a permanent negotiation with pain. He did not complain about this. He had learned, in the years since the fire, that complaining about the things that could be endured was a waste of energy he needed for other purposes. The fire had been on a Thursday, 3 years ago last spring. He had been working a night shift at a warehouse on the east side of the city when the call came. By the time he reached Delaney Street, the apartment building was a column of orange light against the night sky, and the paramedics were already there, and his wife, Renee, was not among the people standing on the sidewalk. His daughter Lily had survived because Eleanor Purvis, the retired school teacher who lived across the hall, had heard the smoke alarm and carried the 3-year-old through the stairwell in her own arms. Ethan owed that woman a debt that had no currency. He moved them to a small house on the south side of Millbrook. 2 bedrooms, a yard with a rusted swing set that he kept meaning to replace and never quite got to. He arranged his work schedule around Lily's school hours and learned slowly, imperfectly, with a great deal of burned dinners and missed permission slips, what it meant to be both parents at once. Some nights, after Lily fell asleep, he sat on the edge of her bed and didn't move for a long time. He was not brooding. He was simply present in the only way that felt real. Lily was 6 and entirely without fear, and full of opinions about everything from cloud shapes to the correct way to eat a sandwich. She had her mother's eyes warm and direct and slightly challenging, and her father's stubbornness, which she had already learned to disguise as reasoning. She asked about Renee the way children ask about weather, openly, without the weight that adults wrapped around such questions. "Is Mom watching us from heaven?" she had asked once while eating cereal, without looking up from her bowl. Ethan had said yes. Lily had nodded and taken another bite. That was enough for her. His own mother used to say he had a rescuer's instinct, that he could not drive past someone broken down on the side of the road, could not walk past a problem without needing to address it. Ethan didn't see it as a character trait. He saw it as the only way he knew how to move through a world that had already taken too much from him. If he could stop one more thing from falling, he would. That was the man who stepped out of his truck on Maple and Fifth. That was the man who opened the door. Her name was Clara. She offered that much, quietly, once she was settled in the passenger seat with her white cane folded across her knees and the truck's heater working against the cold she had been sitting in. Ethan pulled away from the curb without having made a conscious decision about where he was going, which was how he ended up heading for his own house. She looked to be in her late 20s, pale from the cold, fine-featured, with a stillness about her that he quickly understood was not peace but containment. The kind that a person develops when they have learned that visible distress invites the wrong kind of attention. "You said my name," he said after several minutes of silence. "I know. We've never met." "No. Then how?" "Not tonight," she said. Not unkindly. Carefully, the way a person manages the sequence of a revelation they are not yet ready to make. "I'll explain everything. Just not tonight." He let it go. He pulled into his driveway and sat with the engine running for a moment. "I have a daughter," he said. "She's 6 years old. She's asleep in there." He kept his voice level. "Whatever you're running from, whatever is following you, I need to know it's not going to come into that house and hurt her." Clara turned her face toward him. Her pale eyes didn't focus, but there was something in her expression that was more perceptive than sight. "If I believed staying here would harm your daughter," she said, "I would have stayed on the bench." He didn't ask how she knew about Lily. Mrs. Eleanor Purvis had been watching the child that evening. She handed Lily off at the front door with a single searching look at the woman standing behind Ethan, a look she was too well-mannered to put into words. Lily had no such restraint. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, studying Clara with her head tilted to one side, and then said with the direct efficiency of children, "You can't see, can you?" Clara smiled. It was the first natural thing she had done since the bus stop. "No," she said, "I can't. My dad brings people home sometimes." Lily said, as though this resolved the matter, "Are you hungry? We have cereal and also some of that leftover soup if you want the good option." Clara was given the couch with every spare blanket in the house. Ethan sat in the armchair across from her until she fell asleep, and then remained longer still, watching the rain move down the window glass while he turned one question over and over in his mind, patient, persistent, impossible to put down. How did she know his name? By the second morning, Lily had adopted Clara with the comprehensive totality that only a child can manage. She brought Clara toast without being asked and described the layout of the house in careful, unsolicited detail. "The kitchen is on your left when you come out of the living room, and there's a step down. So be careful there, and Dad always leaves his boots right next to the mat, so watch out for those because he forgets every single day." She held Clara's hand, walking between rooms with a gravity that belonged to someone 4 times her age, and she did not treat Clara's blindness as a limitation to apologize for. She treated it as a fact to be accounted for. Ethan watched this and felt something open in his chest that he couldn't quite close again. Clara moved through the house with a precision that he tried, for several days, to attribute to quick spatial adaptation. She returned her mug to the exact right spot on the counter without reaching. She navigated the hallway without touching the walls. She paused at doorways, with her head slightly raised, as though she were reading the air of each room before entering it. But the smaller things were harder to explain. She knew without being told that he took his coffee without sugar. She mentioned the old swing set in the backyard during a conversation about Lily, a detail she could not have observed. On the third morning, she asked, quietly, whether Lily might have left her spelling worksheet under the couch cushion because she had a feeling. Ethan checked. It was there. He told himself there were explanations. He stopped telling himself that by the end of the third day, she never turned toward the front windows. When a car slowed on the street outside, she went still in a way that had nothing to do with listening and everything to do with survival. On the fourth evening, a dark SUV rolled past the house twice in the space of 20 minutes. Ethan clocked it both times. He said nothing and turned around to find Clara already standing in the interior hallway, both palms pressed flat against the wall, every bit of color gone from her face. "How long have they been circling?" she asked. He didn't ask how she knew they were circling. "Just started," he said. She closed her eyes. The room felt smaller than it had a moment before. The conversation came that night, late, after Lily had been asleep for 2 hours and the house had settled into the kind of quiet where the kitchen clock sounded like a metronome. Clara sat at the table, with both hands wrapped around a glass of water she wasn't drinking. Ethan sat across from her and did not push. He had learned that some people needed a container of silence before they could bring themselves to speak, and he had time. She had grown up in a different world, she told him. Her father's world. Private floors in glass towers downtown. Cars with tinted windows. People who moved around her father the way smaller objects orbit something massive, adjusting their paths without being asked. She said his name the way a person names a storm system moving in from the coast. Victor Whitmore. Ethan knew the name. Most people in the state did. Whitmore Industries was among the largest private research conglomerates in the country: defense contracts, medical technology, advanced bioengineering. Victor had been on magazine covers. He had given commencement speeches at universities. He had donated a wing to the Children's Hospital, 3 counties over, and his name was on it in letters a foot tall. "He's your father," Ethan said. "He was," Clara said. "He stopped being my father the day he put me in the program." She had been 26 when the project began. Whitmore Industries maintained a division classified, absent from every public record, that was developing neural interface technology for a specific application. The premise, as Victor had explained it to her over dinner in the penthouse apartment where she had grown up, was this: the human brain could process far more environmental data than conscious perception allowed. The project sought to access that latent capacity artificially, training the neural architecture to read and interpret another person's stored information, memories, emotional states, knowledge through physical proximity and direct contact. She had agreed to be a subject. She had been young, and she had believed that her father's certainty was the same thing as his being right. For a time, it seemed to be working. But the human brain does not always accept what men decide to install inside it. The procedure destabilized her optic pathways. Within a year, her vision began to fail, first at the edges, then at the center, gone like candles extinguished one by one in a darkening room. The project physicians maintained for months that the deterioration was temporary. It was not temporary. Victor Whitmore called it an acceptable outcome and redirected the project's resources to the next candidate. "He left you," Ethan said. "He filed me," she said. "Archived" was the word he used. "I was a data point that hadn't yielded the optimal results. So I was stored somewhere out of the way and managed." She paused. "There's a facility 40 minutes from here. It's not a prison. It doesn't look like one. But you can't leave." She had found a gap 3 weeks ago, a shift change, an unlocked service gate, a moment of human error that no system can fully eliminate, and she had walked out into the dark and kept walking until she could not walk anymore. Ethan was quiet for a long time after she stopped talking. "The ability?" he finally said. "The thing they were trying to build. Did it work?" Clara set her glass down. "You served in the military for 2 years after high school," she said. "You don't talk about it. When Lily asks why certain sounds startle you, you tell her you're just ticklish, because it's the answer that makes her laugh. Your wife's name was Renee. She used to slip small notes into your jacket pockets, just a sentence or two, and you still check the pockets of your old jackets sometimes, because the habit of hoping is stronger than knowing what you'll find." The kitchen clock ticked. Ethan's throat worked. His eyes were very bright. "It worked," Clara said softly. The dark SUV stopped circling. That was worse than when it had been moving. On the 5th night, Ethan woke to a sound from the back of the house, the particular soft crack of a door frame giving way. He was in the kitchen in seconds, flashlight in hand. The back door had been forced. The lock was bent outward. The wood of the frame splintered cleanly. The house was empty. Whoever had entered had withdrawn quickly, either spooked by his footsteps or satisfied by what they'd confirmed. 2 sets of footprints in the mud on the back steps. He found Clara already standing in the hallway, with Lily held against her side, the child still half asleep with her face buried in Clara's shoulder. Clara's expression was not panicked. It was resolved, which was a different and more frightening thing. "They weren't here to take anything," she said. "They were confirming I was still here, that I hadn't moved on." "I'm calling the police," Ethan said. "The Millbrook precinct has received substantial contributions from the Whitmore Foundation for the past 6 years, Clara said. "It's not overt, but the relationship exists, and I've seen evidence of it." She paused. "Filing a report puts my location on record in a system my father has access to." Ethan looked at her. He looked at his daughter, who had one arm looped loosely around Clara's neck in the drowsy, uncomplicated way of children who trust entirely. He made his decision. "You're not leaving," he said. Clara turned her face toward him. Something shifted in her expression, not gratitude exactly, though it was related to gratitude. Something older and more tentative, like a thing that had stopped expecting to exist and was only now, in the careful dark of his hallway, beginning to relearn what it meant to be safe. 2 days later, his phone rang from a blocked number. A man's voice, measured, unhurried, the voice of someone who had never once needed to raise it, told Ethan that he was in possession of something that belonged to Victor Whitmore, and that a quiet, immediate resolution would be in everyone's interest. Ethan said several things in response that cannot be reprinted here. Then, he hung up. He was still holding the phone when his phone rang again 53 minutes later. It was Lily's school. She had not come out at dismissal. 2 men had been seen near the side gate. The security camera covering that entrance had malfunctioned at 2:58 in the afternoon. He drove to the school. He spoke to the principal and to a police officer who took his statement with a careful, polite disengagement that confirmed everything Clara had warned him about. He drove home and sat at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface and a sound somewhere behind his sternum that he could not allow to become what it wanted to become. Clara was there when he walked in. She knew before he said a word. "She's not hurt," Clara said immediately. "They won't hurt her. She's leverage. She has no value to my father damaged. He will hold her until I come back, and then he'll return her." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because I have read his memory of every decision he has made in the last 4 years, she said. "My father is ruthless, but he is also precise. He destroys what he can't use and preserves what he can. A harmed child creates liability. He won't touch her." Ethan pressed his hands harder against the table. His eyes were red and dry. He was a man who had learned to carry immense things and keep moving. But Lily was the seam at the center of all of it, the one place where his endurance had an edge. Clara reached across the table. She placed her hand over his. "I'm going back," she said. "If I present myself voluntarily, he'll return her immediately. That's how he operates. I'm not going to let you do that. You can't stop me, she said. And even if you could, you wouldn't. Because you know I'm right. A pause. I can feel that you know I'm right. Don't, he said. I'm sorry. And she meant it. He could see that she meant it fully, not apologizing for what she could sense in him, but for the fact that it hurt him to be known so clearly. He stood and walked to the window. He stood with the afternoon light falling across his shoulders and looked out at the rusted swing set in the yard. And he made the same choice he had made at the bus stop on Maple and 5th, at 11 o'clock in the rain. He could not explain why it was always the same choice. He could only make it. You're not going alone, he said. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring. Ethan had met Marcus 4 years ago on a job site, a former private security contractor who had left the industry after a contract that conflicted with something he wouldn't name but clearly hadn't stopped thinking about. He was steady and economical and possessed of the particular calm that comes from having been in genuinely dangerous situations and simply deciding each time to deal with what was in front of him. He had never asked Ethan for anything. Ethan had never asked him for anything either, until now. Tell me where to be, Marcus said. The facility sat 40 minutes outside Millbrook on a rural highway, behind a tree line that had been planted to look natural and wasn't. Low, modern architecture. A corporate logo too small to read at highway speed. A staffed gate. The kind of place that existed by being unremarkable to anyone who wasn't looking. Marcus knew the language of secured buildings, how they were structured, where the soft points lived, how to move through a space in the intervals between patrol rotations. He had worked in environments like this before, under other circumstances, for reasons he didn't revisit. Tonight he worked in this one because there was a child inside, and because Ethan Carter had never once asked him for anything until now. Clara had already made her own arrangements before either of them could object. She called the facility gate from Ethan's phone while Ethan was in the garage, told the guard she was coming in voluntarily, and had a cab on the way before he came back inside. By the time he understood what she had done, she was already gone. The distraction worked. The facility's attention collapsed toward the front entrance, toward the daughter returning. Finally, on her own terms. In the rear corridor, near a locked room that Marcus opened with a bypass tool and the patience of a man who had done harder things, a small girl sat on a cot with her knees pulled to her chest. She looked up when the door opened. She looked at her father in the doorway. She didn't cry until she was in his arms. And then she cried the way children cry when they have held themselves together for as long as they absolutely can, completely, without reservation, because the person who finally arrived was the right one. I knew you'd come, she said against his shoulder. I know you knew, he said. His voice was not entirely steady. They found Clara on the upper floor of the building, in a room where the lights were bright and functional, and a man in a dark suit stood at the center of it, like someone who had never learned how to stand in a room without controlling it. Victor Whitmore was in his early 60s, gray-haired and precise, with the careful, unhurried quality of a man accustomed to watching other people react while he himself remained still. He was not a man who displayed surprise. When Ethan came through the door behind Marcus, Victor simply redirected his attention the way a camera adjusts its angle smoothly, without indicating that anything unexpected had occurred. Mr. Carter, he said, pleasantly, you've caused considerable inconvenience. Your men broke into my house, Ethan said. Then they took my daughter. A calibrated measure to facilitate a necessary outcome, Victor said. The child is unharmed, as I imagine you've confirmed. His gaze moved to Clara with the unhurried attention of a man reviewing inventory. You came back. I came back, Clara said. Because I brought something with me. For the first time, the stillness in Victor's face registered something. A slight tightening, a recalibration. Every internal file from the neural study, Clara said. Every trial record, every adverse outcome, every name, every decision you made that you needed to not be on record. She let that settle. I have had access to your memory for 4 years, Father. Every time you reviewed the project. Every time you weighed which losses were acceptable. Every time you told yourself it was science and not what it actually was. She paused. The attorney I contacted 3 days ago has everything. It goes to federal investigators this evening, whether or not I make another phone call. The room was very quiet. Victor was a man who had built an empire by being the one who held all the information. He was looking now at a woman he had discarded, whom he had believed to be contained and manageable, and understanding in the particular way that brilliant, controlled people understand things they have failed to foresee, that the variable he had archived had been running calculations the entire time. "You weren't part of it," he said. "You were a subject. You have no standing." "I was your daughter," Clara said. That was enough standing. Marcus had the room secured. Ethan stood between Clara and her father, still and unhurried, and did not move from that position. The documentation reached the federal investigators before morning. It was not hacked. It was not stolen. It had been absorbed over 4 years of proximity, every review meeting Victor had attended with Clara in the room, every conversation conducted near her about the project he believed she could not understand because she could not see. He had confused blindness with absence. He had not considered that the capability his program had installed in her was functioning perfectly, only turned on him rather than for him. 14 subjects across 6 years. 7 serious adverse outcomes. Internal safety reviews that had been suppressed. Regulatory filings that bore no resemblance to what had actually occurred in the facility. The documentation was extraordinary in its specificity, its completeness, and its accuracy. Victor Whitmore was taken into federal custody at 6:42 the following morning. Whitmore Industries began to come apart with a speed that financial analysts would later describe as one of the most rapid institutional collapses they had documented. Stock value plummeted before trading was halted. 3 board members resigned before noon. The facility on the rural highway was sealed by federal order. The corporate logo on the entrance, too small to read at highway speed, was covered with a paper notice before the end of the day. The man who had reduced his daughter to a data point discovered, in the end, that the data had not remained where he filed it. The weeks that followed were quieter than anything Ethan had known in a long time. Clara was seen by a team of neurologists at a university hospital 2 hours from Millbrook. Physicians who had no relationship with Whitmore Industries, no financial exposure to its outcomes, no interest in any result but the correct one. They evaluated her with the careful, unhurried attention of people whose only objective was accuracy. The news was not simple. The optic nerve damage was significant, but 2 of the 3 specialists believed that a targeted surgical intervention, combined with a newer therapeutic approach, could restore meaningful partial vision within 18 months. Possibly more, possibly less. One doctor said that the honest answer was that the honest answer wasn't yet known, and then said that was a better answer than the one she'd been given before, which was that nothing was possible. Clara cried on the drive home. Not with drama, not loudly. She turned her face toward the passenger window and cried the way a person cries when they have been holding a door closed for so long that opening it even slightly takes everything they have, and the relief and the grief and the possibility all come through at once, and there is no way to be neat about it. Ethan drove. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "We'll figure it out." She kept her face toward the window. "You keep saying we." "I keep meaning it," he said. Lily processed the ordeal with the alarming efficiency of a child who had decided, somewhere in the back room of a building 40 minutes from home, that being frightened was not going to be the last thing she was. She had bad dreams for 2 weeks and slept in her father's room when they came, but during the day she was herself, fully, insistently herself. She drew pictures in crayon and left them on the refrigerator. A small house with 3 figures in front of it, a large sun in the upper right corner, a dog that bore a passing resemblance to several different animals simultaneously. No one in the household actually owned a dog. Lily had been addressing this oversight with increasing urgency. One Saturday morning, she climbed into Clara's lap with a picture book she couldn't quite read on her own yet and asked for help. Clara said she couldn't see the pages. Lily said she knew, and that she would describe the pictures out loud and Clara could help with the hard words, because Clara was smart and it seemed like a perfectly workable arrangement. Clara agreed that it did. They sat together on the couch like that for an hour, the child narrating images while the woman helped her sound out words, and the whole thing operated with the easy naturalness of something that had always existed and had only recently been allowed to begin. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway with a coffee mug and did not move, because the moment felt like something that would change if he touched it. In the evenings, when the dishes were done and the house had settled, Clara sometimes sat in the backyard while Lily chased fireflies through the long summer grass. She couldn't see the light. She could feel the warmth of the air, the particular softness of a night without wind, the sensation of a yard that had become familiar, the way a place becomes familiar when you have lived in it long enough to know it without looking. She could hear Lily laughing from across the dark. "I think about the bus stop sometimes," she said one evening, to the man sitting 2 feet away from her in the grass. "What about it? How long I sat there before you came." The fireflies moved through the dark at the edges of the yard. I had nearly stopped expecting anyone. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't looking for anything either," he said. "I was just going home." Clara turned her face slightly upward. "Maybe that's what it is," she said. "Maybe it's not about looking. Maybe it's just about not driving past." Lily's laughter traveled across the yard, pure and unguarded, and entirely itself. The sound of a child who did not know, in any practical sense, what it meant to be afraid of the dark because the people she trusted were in it with her. Ethan set his mug in the grass. He did not say anything. He felt the weight of what he had been carrying 3 years of it. More, and he felt also, sitting in the summer night with Clara beside him and his daughter running through the yard, that the weight was not only grief, it was also this. Whatever this was, whatever it was choosing, quietly, without announcement, to become. He did not need to name it tonight. Tonight was already enough.